me and her, if something happens
No.
to her and she dies today, I'm not going to have a new woman in the bed 3 days later because, to death do us part.
Did you sleep with anyone else? Were you intimate with anyone else?
Yes, I was.
Did you use protection?
No.
You have good reason to doubt your son Keith's paternity. And now your marriage is on the rocks. It says you all broke up for a few days around Keith's conception. Had you ever told Mr. McCrory about this?
No, I didn't. Because I see it as that, why would I have to tell him if we're not together?
So you felt like we're broken
It's
up?
my business.
She ignored me. Finally, I get a hold of her, and there's a guy in the background to her. She's like, oh, well, my friends are here. I got to go. We're just chilling, blah, blah, blah.
Interesting. So while you're taking that break or you're broken up, you admittedly slept with someone else?
Yes, I did.
Without protection?
Yes. It's just 1,000%
She's a
no,
liar.
that's his child right there. That's his kid. It's going to come back. He's going to...
This court case unfolds under the authority of Judge Lauren Lake, where multiple families arrive carrying doubt, emotional exhaustion, and unresolved questions about paternity. The courtroom becomes an evidence stage in a divorce case atmosphere, even though the legal issues extend far beyond marriage. At the center of the proceedings are DNA test results, long-standing secrets, and the reality that people regret taking truth lightly when it finally arrives. This is not entertainment for those present. It is a real confrontation with identity, trust, and the concept of justice in jurisprudence. The first matter before the court involves a married couple whose relationship has been destabilized by prior court appearances and unresolved paternity issues involving other children. The husband comes to court questioning whether the child he has been raising is biologically his. The wife insists on certainty, repeatedly expressing confidence while also acknowledging past actions that introduce legal doubt. Judge Lauren Lake carefully separates emotional reactions from legal relevance, explaining the relationship between law and justice. The court is not deciding morality or personal behavior, but determining biological truth supported by evidence. As testimony unfolds, the court hears that the couple experienced a brief separation during the time of conception. During that period, the wife admits to being intimate with another man without protection. This admission becomes critical under evidentiary standards. Judge Lauren Lake emphasizes that honesty at the evidence stage is essential because adverse inference in Evidence Act principles can affect how credibility is assessed. While no criminal wrongdoing is alleged, the court must weigh truthfulness against inconsistencies. The husband describes how trust eroded after earlier DNA revelations involving another child. He explains that truth changes everything, not only legally but emotionally. His fear is not rooted solely in biology, but in the loss of certainty about his role as a father. The courtroom atmosphere reflects many themes often discussed in the Truth Changes Everything podcast and the Game-Changing Attorney podcast, where legal clarity collides with emotional fallout. Judge Lauren Lake orders DNA testing to resolve the dispute definitively. The court explains that a DNA test is not punishment. It is a tool of justice designed to protect all parties, especially the child. The results are revealed in court, and they confirm that the husband is, in fact, the biological father. Relief follows, but Judge Lauren Lake reminds the parties that legal truth does not automatically heal emotional damage. The marriage remains fragile, and the court acknowledges that recovery requires more than scientific certainty. This moment mirrors themes found in Celebrate Recovery testimonies, where truth is only the first step toward healing. The second case presented in the same court session expands the scope of the discussion. An adult woman seeks clarity about her biological father after decades of inconsistency, denial, and emotional absence. She explains that her entire life has been shaped by unanswered questions. Her name was never placed on a birth certificate, and she grew up without certainty, a situation that often appears in adoption stories, full episodes, and long-running family court disputes. The alleged father denies paternity with confidence, asserting that he has long believed another man is responsible. He introduces a shocking claim, stating that the biological father may be his own relative. This allegation brings discomfort into the courtroom, but Judge Lauren Lake remains focused on procedure, reminding all parties that allegations must be supported by evidence. The court does not operate on rumor or resentment. Witnesses testify about years of inconsistent parenting, emotional abandonment, and confusion. The court hears how the woman was sometimes treated as a daughter and sometimes rejected. Judge Lauren Lake explains that such inconsistency is damaging and contradicts the broader concept of justice in jurisprudence, where fairness and responsibility are foundational. She notes that child support obligations, emotional support, and identity recognition are interconnected, even when legal responsibility is disputed. DNA testing is again ordered, reinforcing the court's reliance on objective truth rather than personal narrative. The results confirm that the man who denied paternity is not the biological father. While he reacts with vindication, Judge Lauren Lake intervenes, explaining that legal correctness does not erase the harm caused by years of doubt and absence. This ruling aligns with principles often discussed in Supreme Court child support debates, where biological truth and parental responsibility do not always align neatly. Throughout the proceedings, Judge Lauren Lake maintains a consistent judicial philosophy. She explains that law is a framework, not a weapon, and justice must account for human consequences. The courtroom becomes a living example of how the relationship between law and justice is tested when DNA evidence resolves facts but leaves emotional questions unanswered. The cases illustrate why DNA test cheating stories resonate with audiences. They expose how secrecy, denial, and fear compound over time. People regret taking truth lightly because delay magnifies harm. The court does not celebrate the revelation of secrets. It acknowledges their cost. Judge Lauren Lake repeatedly emphasizes accountability, clarity, and respect for the children whose lives are shaped by these decisions. No dramatic staging is required to understand the weight of these cases. The power lies in the process itself: testimony, evidence, and verified results. The court's role is not to shame, but to establish facts so families can move forward. Whether reconciliation is possible remains outside the court's authority, but the truth provides a foundation. This courtroom story demonstrates that DNA testing is not merely a procedural step. It is a turning point where identity, responsibility, and justice intersect. As explored in discussions similar to the Divorce Course podcast and legal analysis forums, these moments redefine family structures permanently. Judge Lauren Lake closes the proceedings by reminding all parties that truth does not end pain, but without truth, healing is impossible. In the end, the court delivers what it is designed to provide: clarity. The rest, recovery, forgiveness, and rebuilding, must happen beyond the courtroom walls. As the courtroom proceedings move forward, Judge Lauren Lake deepens the focus on how unresolved paternity disputes ripple through entire families. The court makes it clear that these cases are not isolated incidents, but patterns that repeat when truth is delayed or avoided. The judge explains that many people enter court believing a DNA test will simply confirm what they already know. Yet the reality is that people regret taking truth for granted when results challenge long-held assumptions. This principle echoes themes often explored in the Truth Changes Everything podcast, where legal facts permanently reshape personal narratives. In both matters before the court, Judge Lauren Lake emphasizes the evidence stage as the most critical phase of the case. Testimony, documents, and DNA results are not treated as dramatic revelations, but as structured proof under the law. The judge clarifies how adverse inference in Evidence Act principles operate, particularly when one party withholds information or delays testing. Silence, the court explains, can be as influential as words when determining credibility and responsibility. The courtroom includes multiple participants beyond the immediate parties. Family members, former spouses, and adult children appear, each carrying their own version of the truth. Their presence highlights how paternity issues extend beyond legal definitions and into identity formation. Judge Lauren Lake notes that many adults who come before her describe childhoods shaped by uncertainty, a recurring theme in adoption, stories, full episodes, and long-running family court cases. The court recognizes that the absence of clarity often results in emotional harm that no verdict can fully repair. As testimony continues, the judge addresses the tension between emotional expression and legal relevance. While emotions are acknowledged, they are not permitted to override evidence. Judge Lauren Lake explains that the relationship between law and justice requires balance. Law demands proof and procedure, while justice demands fairness and acknowledgement of harm. The courtroom becomes a space where these two forces interact, sometimes uncomfortably, but necessarily. The first family's case illustrates how a confirmed DNA result does not erase prior deception or emotional damage. Even after biological paternity is established, the court recognizes that trust has been fractured. Judge Lauren Lake addresses both spouses, explaining that legal truth is only one layer of accountability. The judge references principles commonly discussed in the Divorce Course podcast, noting that marriages often fail not because of a single act, but because of sustained dishonesty and unresolved conflict. In discussing the second case, Judge Lauren Lake turns attention to long-term consequences of denying paternity. The adult daughter explains that growing up without a named father affected her sense of belonging and self-worth. The judge acknowledges that while the court can determine biological facts, it cannot restore lost time. This moment reflects broader debates often heard in Supreme Court child support discussions, where legal obligations intersect with moral responsibility. The alleged father's reaction to the DNA results becomes another point of judicial instruction. Judge Lauren Lake cautions against triumphalism, explaining that being biologically excluded does not absolve someone of the emotional role they played. Raising a child, even inconsistently, creates expectations and bonds that cannot simply be dismissed once science intervenes. This perspective aligns with discussions found in the Game-Changing Attorney podcast, where legal victories are examined alongside ethical accountability. Throughout the session, Judge Lauren Lake repeatedly returns to the idea that DNA tests are neutral tools. They do not accuse, shame, or vindicate on their own. Instead, they provide clarity where speculation once dominated. The court explains that many people fear DNA testing because it removes ambiguity, and ambiguity often feels safer than truth. Yet, as the judge notes, uncertainty corrodes relationships over time. The courtroom atmosphere underscores how DNA test cheating stories often begin not with malice, but with avoidance. Avoidance of difficult conversations, avoidance of accountability, and avoidance of consequences. Judge Lauren Lake explains that the court exists precisely because avoidance eventually fails. When families reach this stage, legal intervention becomes the last mechanism for resolution. The judge also addresses how paternity disputes affect children differently depending on age. For young children, uncertainty can disrupt bonding and stability. For adults, it can undermine identity and family history. The court acknowledges that neither outcome is acceptable, reinforcing why early honesty is essential. These reflections mirror themes from Celebrate Recovery testimonies, where acknowledgement of past harm becomes a prerequisite for healing. As proceedings near conclusion, Judge Lauren Lake summarizes the legal outcomes and their implications. She explains that the court has fulfilled its duty by determining biological truth and clarifying legal standing. However, she stresses that justice does not end with a ruling. The parties are encouraged to seek counseling, mediation, or personal reflection to address emotional consequences. The court's role, she reminds them, is limited but vital. The judge's closing remarks focus on accountability. She explains that the concept of justice in jurisprudence is not solely about punishment or validation, but about responsibility. Responsibility to children, to partners, and to oneself. When truth is delayed, responsibility becomes heavier, not lighter. This idea resonates with audiences familiar with long-form legal discussions and podcast analyses of family law dynamics. Judge Lauren Lake adjourns the court with a reminder that legal clarity should be used as a foundation, not a weapon. DNA results should not be used to shame or dominate, but to inform decisions moving forward. The courtroom empties, but the implications remain. Families leave with answers, even if those answers are painful. This continuation of the courtroom story reinforces that paternity cases are not merely procedural disputes. They are deeply human conflicts where law intersects with identity, trust, and long-term emotional health. DNA testing resolves questions of biology, but it also forces individuals to confront choices they made long before entering the courtroom. In the broader context, these cases exemplify why family courts remain one of the most emotionally charged areas of the legal system. They deal with origins, belonging, and responsibility, issues that define a person's life. Judge Lauren Lake's approach demonstrates how firmness, empathy, and legal precision can coexist without spectacle. As seen throughout these proceedings, truth does change everything. Not instantly, not comfortably, but irrevocably. The court does not promise healing, only clarity. What follows is left to those who must now live with the truth they once avoided. As the courtroom proceedings reach their conclusion, Judge Lauren Lake delivers a broader reflection on what these cases represent beyond individual outcomes. The court has resolved the legal questions placed before it, but the judge makes clear that the consequences of these DNA tests extend far beyond the courtroom. These cases illustrate why family court is often the setting where people confront the most uncomfortable truths of their lives. When truth arrives late, it does not arrive gently. Judge Lauren Lake explains that paternity disputes frequently emerge after years of emotional strain, mistrust, and silence. Many people assume that avoiding a DNA test will preserve peace, yet the opposite often occurs. Uncertainty breeds suspicion, resentment, and emotional distance. By the time families reach the evidence stage in divorce case proceedings or standalone paternity hearings, relationships are already fractured. The court becomes the final place where ambiguity is stripped away. In addressing both cases together, the judge emphasizes that DNA testing is not about winning or losing. It is about restoring factual clarity where speculation once ruled. This is why so many people regret taking truth lightly. The judge notes that the phrase, "truth changes everything," is not a slogan but a lived reality for those sitting in the courtroom. Once biological facts are confirmed, no one can return to the comfort of uncertainty. Judge Lauren Lake revisits the role of evidence, explaining how courts rely on objective standards rather than emotional narratives. The Adverse Inference in Evidence Act is discussed as a principle that protects fairness, ensuring that withholding information does not undermine justice. When parties delay testing or provide incomplete testimony, the law permits the court to consider those actions when evaluating credibility. This reinforces the idea that honesty is not optional in legal proceedings. The judge also addresses the psychological toll of prolonged paternity disputes. In the first case, although the DNA test confirmed biological fatherhood, the emotional damage caused by doubt remains unresolved. Judge Lauren Lake explains that legal confirmation does not erase the memory of mistrust. This dynamic reflects themes commonly discussed in the Divorce Course podcast, where couples learn that rebuilding trust requires sustained accountability, not a single result. In the second case, the adult daughter's experience highlights the long-term effects of denial and inconsistency. Growing up without certainty about one's parentage shapes identity, self-esteem, and relationships. Judge Lauren Lake explains that while the court can determine biological truth, it cannot replace the years lost to doubt. This reality frequently appears in adoption stories, full episodes, and family law analyses, where adults seek closure decades after childhood wounds were formed. The alleged father's response to exclusionary DNA results becomes a moment of judicial instruction. Judge Lauren Lake reminds him that biology does not erase responsibility for emotional harm. The court acknowledges that raising a child, even intermittently, creates expectations that cannot be dismissed once scientific proof emerges. This perspective aligns with discussions often explored in the Game-Changing Attorney podcast, where legal outcomes are weighed against moral accountability. Throughout her remarks, Judge Lauren Lake reinforces the relationship between law and justice. Law provides structure, procedure, and enforceable outcomes. Justice requires empathy, acknowledgement of harm, and ethical reflection. The courtroom becomes the space where these principles intersect. The judge makes it clear that legal correctness without compassion risks deepening wounds rather than healing them. The court also touches on broader societal implications. Judge Lauren Lake explains that paternity uncertainty affects not only families, but also legal systems responsible for child support, inheritance, and parental rights. Supreme Court child support precedents have repeatedly emphasized the importance of establishing paternity early to protect children's financial and emotional well-being. Delayed truth complicates enforcement and often results in prolonged conflict. As the session draws to a close, Judge Lauren Lake speaks directly about accountability. She explains that the concept of justice in jurisprudence is rooted in responsibility to others, especially children. Adults have an obligation to confront difficult truths early, even when doing so risks discomfort. Avoidance may feel protective in the short term, but it magnifies harm over time. This message mirrors insights found in Celebrate Recovery testimonies, where individuals acknowledge that healing begins only after truth is accepted. The courtroom atmosphere remains solemn rather than celebratory. DNA test cheating stories often captivate audiences because of shock value, but Judge Lauren Lake strips away sensationalism. She emphasizes that real people live with the consequences long after the cameras stop. Children grow up carrying answers they did not ask for, and adults must reconcile their choices with irreversible outcomes. Judge Lauren Lake adjourns the court with a reminder that legal clarity should serve as a foundation for growth, not a tool for punishment or humiliation. DNA testing resolves biological questions, but emotional recovery requires humility, patience, and sustained effort. The court has done its part by delivering factual truth. What follows lies in the hands of those involved. In reflecting on both cases, the judge underscores a final lesson. Family court exists not because families fail, but because truth was delayed. When honesty is postponed, law must intervene to restore balance. These proceedings demonstrate why transparency matters and why truth, once revealed, reshapes every relationship it touches. The courtroom empties, leaving behind answers that will redefine family structures and personal identities. Some leave relieved, others wounded, but none unchanged. This is the enduring power of truth within the justice system. It does not promise comfort, only clarity. And clarity, once achieved, cannot be undone.